The slap didn't echo. It was quiet, intimate, like the snap of something that should never break. Respect, blood, memory. Don Silas didn't fall right away. He just swayed, as if his body couldn't quite believe that hand, the one he had fed, clothed, forgiven, had struck him. "You were never anything to me," Jay spat, eyes red with rage and old hate. "Just the fool who raised another man's son." The room went dead silent. The clock in the dining room kept ticking, cruel and indifferent. And Scout took a step forward. He didn't growl. Not yet. He just looked at Jace as if for the first time he saw what Silas had refused to admit for years. Poison can grow right under your roof without making a sound. Morning came slow to Ash Hollow, with a sun that felt more decorative than warm, like it was faking a haplila that no longer belonged there. The air smelled of dry earth, stale bread, and the kind of long silences only forgotten towns know. Don Silas Alvarez sat in his wicker chair by the iron gate, the same one where he'd waited for letters that never came and footsteps that never returned. His hands, worn by war and years, gently stroked Scout's head, his retired canine partner, whose graying fur told more about their time together than his age ever could. Scout wasn't sleeping. He never truly did. His amber eyes stayed alert on the cobbled street, as if the past might slip through some unseen crack in time. In the distance, a bicycle bell broke the stillness. It was Leela, the girl from the house. Next door, messy braids, dust-covered shoes. "Good morning, Don Silas," she called with a smile. "Did Scout have breakfast yet, or is he still on a love strike?" Silas looked up. That smile cost him more than it seemed. "He doesn't need food, child. He feeds on memories. And sometimes that's heavier than a sack of corn." Leela got off her bike. She walked slowly to Scout, who didn't bark or move. He just raised his head, looked at her, then laid his snout on Silas's leg. "My grandma says animals can feel when something bad's about to happen. Do you believe that?" Silas breathed in deep. The jasmine climbing the gate mixed with something thicker in the air, a foreboding. Scout doesn't feel. He knows it's us who feel, and too often, too late. From across the street, Miss Edith poked her wrinkled face out the window. "Silas, your son showed up early this morning. I saw him get out of a black car, no bags, and no good in his eyes." The silence thickened. Lila lowered her gaze, uneasy. Scout gave a low growl, as if his old military instincts kicked in. Just hearing the name no one said aloud. Silas didn't answer. He just lifted a hand in thanks and turned back to the gate. Minutes later, Jace appeared. Tall, scruffy beard, dark sunglasses, and a t-shirt clinging to him like his tension. He walked with the arrogance of someone who still believed the world owed him something. "Father," he said flatly, "we need to talk." Silas didn't move. Neither did Scout. Only the sunlight shifted, slipping between the bars like it, too, wanted to listen in. "You here to talk? Or to collect?" the old man asked quietly. Jace let out a dry laugh. "I don't have time for riddles. I'm under pressure. I need the money Mom left you." She didn't leave money. She left silence, and that, you never knew how to hear it. Scout stood up. He didn't bark, didn't strike. Just placed himself between Silas and Jace like a wall made of flesh, memories, and scars. "That damn dog again?" Jace spat on the ground. "You were always more of a father to him than to me." Silas's eyes gleamed. Not with rage, but with something older, resignation. "He didn't betray me, didn't steal, didn't lie. And when bullets flew, he didn't run, you did." Jace turned his back. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to warn you, if I don't get that money, you won't be living in this house much longer." When he left, the street fell silent again. But it wasn't the same silence. Not anymore. But it wasn't the same anymore. Something had cracked in the air. Layla, who had been sitting by the gate, whispered, "Don Silas, are you afraid of him?" "No, child. I knew fear in the trenches. What I feel now is a sorrow that knows too much." Scout lay back down but didn't close his eyes. And the wind carried a strange scent, like gasoline, like time burning. Somewhere in the past, a gunshot echoed, not in the street, in memory. And Scout, for the first time in years, trembled. But Silas didn't notice. Because sometimes old men learn to ignore the signs until it's too late to run from the pain. The train arrived an hour late. Not due to any technical issue, just that Jace always found a reason not to fully show up. Ash Hollow Station looked older than he remembered. Or maybe it was his own reflection in the train window that made him feel like the world had shrunk. He got off with a worn-out backpack slung over one shoulder, lit a cigarette. The smoke vanished into the warm afternoon air, but the smell sour tobacco and resentment stuck to his shirt like old regrets. "This town's a damn wreck," he muttered without looking at anyone. As he walked the cobbled streets, a few older neighbors recognized him. They looked away, not because they didn't want to greet him, but because they knew his return didn't bring good news. Mothers quietly called their children indoors. Ash Hollow remembered everything, especially the wounds that never healed. Don Silas's house still stood the same. Whitewashed walls, cracked tiles, a tired lemon tree leaning like an old man surrendering to gravity. Scout, the dog, lay beneath the porch, head between his paws, eyes half open, watching the world with that quiet wisdom of those who've seen too much. Jay stopped a few feet away. Scout slowly lifted his head. He didn't growl, didn't wag his tail. He just looked at him, as if he knew that man's heart had no room left for tenderness. Don Silas opened the door slowly. He wore a faded linen shirt, sleeves rolled up and time carved into his face like stone. He didn't smile when he saw Jace, but he didn't back away either. "You came back," he said simply. Jace forced a crooked smile. "I'm not here for much, just what's mine." Silas didn't respond. He just opened the door wide enough for him to enter. Scout stood and followed, like an old shadow refusing to part from its master. The house smelled of old coffee and wood, of real life. Jace dropped into a chair without asking, lit another cigarette. "You haven't changed a damn thing," he said, glancing around. Silas poured 2 glasses of water, set one in front of him. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from everything else. "Not everything needs to change to endure," he said. Jace laughed, a dry, rusted metal kind of laugh. "Still with your old man TV quotes. You know what's changed?" "Me, I'm done asking, Silas. This time I came to take." Silas looked at him for a long time, then took a sip of water and spoke, voice steady. "All I have left is this house, and whatever dignity I've managed to hold on to. There's nothing here for you that wasn't once offered in love and thrown away by you." "Love?" Jace snapped. "And what did I do with your love?" "I buried it with my mother, with her letters, with all the years I lived here as your second choice. I was never your son, just a burden you carried out of pity." Silas lowered his gaze. Scout, at his feet, let out a barely audible whimper. "Your mother taught me how to love unconditionally," the old man said. "If I failed, it was because I tried to teach you the same." Jay stood up sharply, knocking the glass to the floor. The water spilled like an open wound across the tiles. "You owe me this house." "I'm taking it," he said coldly. Scout stood up, took a step forward, no growl, no bark. But in his eyes burned everything Silas didn't care to say out loud anymore. Jay sneered. "You still got this damn dog? You think he can protect you?" Silas stepped forward, resting a gentle hand on Scout's head. "He protected me back when you were just a scared little boy." When you screamed at night and no one else dared walk into your room. For a moment, silence turned to stone. Jace looked down. His shoulders dropped, just a little. Then he muttered bitterly, "I didn't come here for lectures. I came to settle scores." He slammed the door behind him. Dust rose from the doorstep. Scout didn't move an inch. Silas sat down, slow and heavy. His hands covered his face. Hours later, Leela showed up on her bike. She held a small paper flower in one hand. "Mr. Silas, can I see Scout? I made this for him." "It's for his collar." Silas wiped his eyes before opening the door. "He's tired, sweetheart. Today he saw more than he should have." "Was it that bad man again?" Silas didn't answer, but he gave her a sorrowful smile. Lila sat on the porch, gently stroked Scout's head, and tied the little flower to his collar. "I'll look after you, Scout. If he comes back, you won't be alone." Scout laid his head on her leg, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he closed his eyes completely. Like maybe, just maybe, he could rest. Even if only for a heartbeat. From the doorway, Silas watched them. His lips barely moved, whispering a prayer too old to have a name. Sometimes, what men destroy gets mended by small hearts that still know how to love. Kale Reel slept beneath a lead-colored sky. The mountain wind drifted down warm and slow, carrying the scent of toasted bread and the tamales Miss Edith sold from her window every Tuesday. In Ash Hollow, routine was a kind of prayer. Everything looked the same except Scout's eyes. The old K9 hadn't stopped watching the eastern horizon for 3 nights straight, as if he were waiting for someone. That morning, Jace returned. No warning. Just his leather jacket, an unshaved beard, and that way of walking like he never says sorry. He knocked on the door like he still lived there. Silas opened slowly. His hand trembled just slightly. Behind him, Scout let out a low growl. "Aren't you gonna invite me in, Dad?" Jace asked with that crook smile that never quite reached his eyes. Silas didn't speak right away. He looked at him the way one looks at an old photo they've tried to burn a dozen times, but keep pulling from the fire. "Come in," he said at last. In the kitchen, the coffee steamed quietly. Scout sat by Silas's chair still, alert. Jace talked. But nothing he said was true. Words about memories. About Mom. About how hard life was in Madrid. His voice was all sugar, but his sentences were cracked like broken dishes. "You know what rent costs over there, right? I'm not here asking for pity, Silas. I'm here for justice. That house. You know Mom meant for it to be mine." Silas turned to the window. Outside, Lila rode past on her bike, whistling a Mexican tune her grandma from Guadalajara had taught her. Scout perked up an ear. "Your mother never said that," Silas replied without looking at him. "And if she had, she'd have said it with love, not threats." Jace laughed dry, humorless. "Of course. The old soldier and his saintly mutt. How many did you kill together, huh? How many barks did it take for you to sleep at night?" Scout growled again, louder this time. Jace stared at him with contempt. This thing's still alive? Should have put him down by now. Silas stood up, not fast, not angry, but there was a quiet soldier's spine in his back that hadn't been seen since he wore a uniform. "That thing, as you call him, saved my life 3 times. And he never once asked for anything in return." The room went still. Jace stood too. In the inside pocket of his jacket, the blade of a knife caught the faintest shimmer of light. But it wasn't for tonight. Not yet, but he was already carrying it with him. "I'll be back tomorrow." "You won't be around forever, old man." His words were blades cold, calculated. Silas didn't answer. Scout didn't bark either. He just watched him walk away, eyes tracking him until he vanished down the street where the fog had started to fall. That evening, Silas took Scout to the field behind the church. They sat there together like they used to, watching the olive trees and the clouds drifting like slow horses across the sky. Silas spoke softly, like whispering secrets to the wind. There are things you can't dig up without killing something. Else along with them, Scout. And him. He's already coming with a shovel in hand. Scout rested his muzzle on his master's knee. A small gesture, barely there. But Silas closed his eyes. And just for a moment, his shoulders stopped carrying the weight of the world. The next day, Jace returned, this time, not alone. 2 men came with him, one Cuban, the other Mexican. Their shirts were open, their hands deep in their pockets, their smiles never reaching their eyes. One wore a rosary around his wrist. The other had a scar splitting his eyebrow in 2. "Silas," Jace called out from the gate. "Let's talk like family." Silas stepped out, unhurried. Scout walked beside him. From the window, Leela watched. Miss Edith was crossing the street with a bag of bread, but she froze when she saw them. Something in her chest, old and wise, whispered that the afternoon would bring either blood or a miracle. "If you're here looking for war," Silas said, his voice cracked but steady, "at least bring soldiers, not jackals." Jace let out a loud laugh. "Look at you, so poetic. Were you always this ridiculous, or has old age turned you into a caricature?" Scout stepped forward. He didn't bark. He didn't bare his teeth, but his whole body turned into a line of fire. The Mexican stepped back. The Cuban reached for something on his belt. And then Lila, without knowing why, shouted from the window, "Leave him alone." Everyone turned to her. She was shaking, but she didn't look away. "He's a good man. He's not alone. And Scout's not alone either." The Cuban cursed under his breath. Jace clenched his fists. Silas said nothing. He simply laid his hand on Scout's head. And for a heartbeat, just a heartbeat, Jace felt something that resembled fear. Evening came. The men left, but their shadows stayed behind, clinging to the ground. Silas shut the door, looked down at Scout, and whispered, "Every hunter carries a knife, but not all of them have what it takes to hold it when it's their own name bleeding." Scout didn't respond. He just lay down at the door like a sentry who already knows the war is closer than it seems. But this time, he knows. He won't face it alone. Ash Hollow, Andalusia. Just before noon. The breeze smelled of toasted bread and old sorrow. On the worn-out porch of Don Silas Alvarez's house, Scout was stretched out like a sleeping guardian. But he wasn't asleep. His ears, trained in the deserts of Mali, picked up every creak, every whisper leaking through the cracks of silence. Layla arrived barefoot, still in her wrinkled school uniform, clutching the storybook to her chest. She sat on the bottom step, just inches from Scout. She offered him a corn biscuit wrapped in a cloth napkin. "Someone yelled at my grandma in the store today. Just 'cause she forgot her card pin," she murmured. No one stood up for her. Scout didn't move. He just raised his eyebrows. Lila gently placed the biscuit between his front paws. "You would have stood up for her, wouldn't you?" From inside the house, Don Silas heard her. He said nothing. There was an old rosary in his fingers. But he wasn't praying. He stared out the window like he could see through time. Sometimes he swore Leela's voice came from another century. In that town, the walls spoke more than the people did. They said things like, "That old man's lost it," or "That dog should have been put down ages ago." But Scout heard them all, and in his eyes there was no anger. Just a noble kind of exhaustion, like a bull that dies standing. That night, Silas found an old photograph. Him, his late wife, and a young Scout with fire in his eyes. They were in Mexico, on a joint mission with the National Guard. It was before the scars, before the world turned gray. Back then, Scout ran through agave fields and gunpowder. He didn't know fear. Only duty, he whispered, running his fingers over the photo. And still, What I remember most is how you lay next to a little girl crying in silence while her village burned. Silas went down to the courtyard. Scout was waiting under the fig tree. The air carried that dry smell that always comes before a storm. Jace comes back tomorrow, Silas said, not looking at him. Says he wants to make peace, but I know that tone. It's the same his mother used the last time she walked out. Soft as velvet, sharp as a butcher's blade. Scout let out a low growl, barely a sound. Silas crouched with effort, resting his forehead against the dog's head. You know what hurts most? He said. That I still love him. After everything, after the silence, the greed. I still wait for the boy who used to read comics with me on the couch. But that boy doesn't live in his body anymore. The next morning, Jace showed up. Dark sunglasses, shirt unbuttoned too far, and the cheap cologne of a man who doesn't belong anywhere. He walked in without knocking. Nice dog, he said. Flatly, though it's about time for the vet, huh? Silas didn't answer. Scout, however, stood up. He didn't bark. He just stepped between Jace and the kitchen table where the house papers lay. You gonna do it? Jace asked. Gonna let your damn dog sign for you. Silas looked at his son like he was seeing him for the last time. I didn't come to fight, Jace lied. I came because I still think you owe me something. You raised me on broken promises and folded flags. Made me a son of a uniform, not of a father. And you, Silas said firmly, not raising his voice, you made me the enemy of love. Silence. From the porch, Leela listened. She had brought a white flower, but she didn't come in. Jace dropped the keys on the table. You've got a week to think, then I'm coming back. And if you don't sign, well, I won't be so polite. Next time. He left without shutting the door. Scout walked over to Silas, sat beside him, and rested his head on his knee. Silas stroked his ear. I swear I'm not afraid, old friend, he said. But being alone hits different. When the enemy has your blood. That night, Lila returned. No stories, no flowers. Just one question. Has Scout ever saved you? Silas smiled. More than once. But the most important time was when he saved what was left of me, after the world shattered in silence. Leela leaned gently on his shoulder. He looks at me like he knows what I'm hiding. That's because he does, Silas replied. Sometimes all we really need is someone who listens, without asking us to explain. A flash of lightning lit up the sky. Scout didn't flinch. He'd weathered worse storms. Silas glanced at the girl, then at the dog. Maybe we can't save everyone, but as long as Scout's still breathing, this house isn't giving up. And neither am I. For the first time in a long while, Leela smiled without fear. Sometimes the soul needs 4 legs to stay upright. The afternoon arrived like a warm breath slipping through cracks in the rooftops. The sun sank slowly over Ash Hollow, painting the whitewashed walls in a tired gold. Don Silas sat beneath the lemon tree that hadn't borne fruit since his wife died. Scout, the old canine dog, rested beside him, ears perked, eyes sunken, watching the horizon like he was waiting for someone who never quite made it back. Across the street, Leela, the neighbor girl, played with a broken doll. Every now and then, she looked over at Scout like she was witnessing a forgotten miracle. Don Silas. Her voice trembled through the dry blossoms. Why doesn't Scout ever bark? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stroked Scout's head slowly, like each strand of fur held a memory. Because he's seen things that barking can't explain. The girl nodded, not fully understanding, but feeling something sacred floating in the air between them. That same night, Jace came back. He didn't knock. He walked in like he still believed he had a claim to everything he'd once walked away from. His shirt hung open, his eyes were grimy, and the stench of cheap tequila clashed with the clean scent of the wood in the house. "Where's the deed to the house?" he asked, skipping any sort of greeting. Silas didn't get up from the couch. "You're not here for memories. You're here for money," Jace laughed. That hollow laugh people give when they've sold themselves so many times they can't remember who bought them first. "And what are you gonna do? Call the dog?" Scout rose. He didn't growl, just walked forward and stood between Silas and Jace, a living shadow, a line you don't cross without consequence. "That animal's old, just like you." Jace spat, and the words hit heavy, like whetstones dropped into an open grave. Silas spoke quietly, but his voice cut slow like a knife. "Old doesn't mean weak. It just means the fight's not for pride anymore, but for what truly matters." Jace chuckled, but something oily shifted in his eyes. Fear. He sat down, looked at Scout, then back at his father. "You know what Mom used to say when you were gone? That Scout loved you more than I ever did." Silas closed his eyes. "Not out of anger, out of sorrow, because Scout never lied to me. And you did." Silence spread like a burn. Scout lay down again, but his eyes never left Jace. The next day, Silas went to the market with Lila. They bought bread, a bundle of jasmine, and some milk for the stray cats sleeping by the town fountain. When they returned, something felt off. The gate was open. Scout wasn't on the porch. Silas knew before he stepped inside. He knew by the smell: sweat, cigarettes, metal. In the living room, Scout stood facing two men who didn't belong there. One held a knife, the other a rope. Jace was behind them, arms crossed, soul in ruins. "I warned you," Silas said. Calm in that way only men who've lost everything can be. "You don't bring violence into this house and expect to leave with forgiveness." One of the men lunged. Scout moved like his bones still remembered the dust of Molly. The knife clattered to the floor. The man went with it, the other ran. Jace stepped back, but Silas was already in front of him. "Your mother raised you with tenderness. I raised you with respect. Where did we go so wrong?" Jace didn't answer. He stared at the floor. There was no blood, just a heavy silence full of things that could no longer be undone. That night, Silas sat with Scout under the lemon tree. They didn't speak, just shared the same exhaustion. Lila arrived with a blanket. "Can I stay here for a while?" "Of course, sweetheart. There's always room here for those who don't harm." She sat beside Scout, resting her head on the dog's back. Scout closed his eyes, not from sleep, not fear, something deeper, something that felt a little like peace. "Don Silas," the little girl whispered, "do you think Scout loves me?" Silas looked up at the sky, now washed in shades of purple. "No, Scout doesn't love you. He chooses you, every day. The way you choose a family you never had, but always deserved." Lila smiled. And in that small, fragile smile, for a second, all the pain, all the fear, all the rot vanished. Because even beneath the bluest sky, there are basements where monsters live. But sometimes, just sometimes, a worn-out man, a broken girl, and an old dog can make that basement feel like home again. The kitchen clock read 2:15 when Scout lifted his head. His ears stiffened. The sound wasn't loud, just a faint crunch, like a boot brushing over the old gravel in the backyard. Silas breathed calmly in his rocking chair, a hand-woven blanket draped over his knees. Lila had brought that blanket from Oaxaca, embroidered with flowers and colors that whispered of her grandmother's son. Silas kept it like a relic because it smelled like sweet corn and a childhood that had never been his. Scout rose slowly, joints cracking like dry twigs. He wasn't the young hound who once ran across the dunes in Mali, but his eyes still saw things others missed. He positioned himself in front of the back door. Didn't bark, just waited, like someone who knows. The enemy always comes when no one's looking. The lock turned with a cold click. Silas opened his eyes, unmoving. "You're here," he whispered. Jace stepped in, wrapped in a black jacket, hands buried in his pockets, eyes lit with rage. "How'd you know I'd come tonight?" Silas didn't answer. Scout stepped forward and let out a low, steady growl. "You gonna let that damn mutt growl at me?" Jay spat. "Is he your son now? Your blood?" Silas stood with effort. "He doesn't share my blood, but he's never asked me for anything but my presence." Jace let out a dry laugh. "Right, the old soldier and his loyal dog. A postcard begging for pity. You raised me, sure, but you never looked at me like a son. I was always just Lucia's boy, never Jace, never yours. And now, old fool, you're gonna pay me what you owe." He pulled a steel rod from the deep pocket of his coat. Its glint sliced through the dim like a dirty flash of lightning. Scout lunged without hesitation. Jace flinched, half a step back. "Get him off, now!" he shouted, frantic. "I didn't come here to kill some old mutt," Silas spoke, voice quiet, even. "He died for me 100 times over. I never taught him that. He chose it. You, on the other hand, you never learned to choose anything unless it was for yourself." The first charge was like a storm. Jace shoved the table, splintered a chair, and Scout flew through the air like a solid shadow. A sharp crack rang out. Scout hit the tiled floor. He shook himself, but something in his breath shifted shorter, thicker. Silas cried out, "No!" Jace didn't stop. "Give me the deed, now!" His eyes weren't human anymore. They were empty, hollow. Scout staggered to his feet, took another step forward. Blood soaked his chest too much, but he kept staring at the intruder, as if he could see everything Silas couldn't. Jace raised the rod. Scout leapt. It all happened in seconds. A blow, a crack, the choked gasp of a dog. Then just the sound of Silas breathing, heavy and alone. Scout fell into the old man's arms. "She dat that it's okay, Scout. It's okay," Silas whispered as the tears slid down without permission. "Don't leave me like this. Not without knowing I loved you more than I ever knew how to love anyone else." Jace backed away now. The rage was gone, only fear remained. I didn't mean," Silas looked up. And for the first time, his voice sliced the air like a blade. "What you didn't mean, Jace, was to learn how to love." At the door, Lila appeared shaking, barefoot, a tiny flashlight in her hand. "Uncle Silas? What?" Her eyes found Scout. She ran to him, dropped to her knees. "No, please. Scout, don't." Jace turned to face the girl. Something in her face broke. "It's just a dog." Lila looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks, and said, "No." He was the only one who listened when everyone else was yelling. "He always knew when I was scared." In the distance, sirens wailed. The neighbors had called the civil guard. Jace lowered the metal bar. He didn't run. He just sat on the floor like a scolded child who didn't understand what he had lost. Silas stroked Scout's back one last time. "Rest now, soldier. You don't have to protect anyone anymore." Lila hugged him without a word. She only cried. And Silas, for the first time in years, let someone hold him without thinking about everything he had lost. Outside, dawn was beginning to bleach the sky. Inside the house, the worst had passed. But so had the truest loyalty. Night had fallen over Ash Hollow like an old blanket, thick with dust and memories no one dared shake loose. The church bells had rung 9 times, but in Silas Alvarez's house, time had stopped long before. Scout, the old war dog, slept uneasily at the foot of his master's armchair. Every so often, he twitched as if his dreams were minefields he still couldn't cross. Silas, hands shaking from years and arthritis, ran his fingers along the worn wood of his cane. He wasn't watching TV. He wasn't reading. He was just listening, as if he knew something or someone was about to break the silence of this too quiet night. The doorbell rang, once, then again. Then fists pounding sharp, urgent. Scout stood, letting out a low growl older than his age, deeper than his throat. Silas rose slowly, leaning on his cane. "Who is it?" he asked, voice thick with the dust of the past. "It's me, old man," Jace answered from the other side, his voice soaked in cheap rum and bitterness. "Open up, I want to talk." Silas hesitated before turning the key. Something inside him, maybe the soldier's instinct, maybe the wounded father, was screaming not to open that door. But he did. Jace stepped in, face flushed, eyes bloodshot, shirt half unbuttoned. Behind him came the smell of wet streets and failure, like an unwelcome guest. "What do you want now, son?" Silas asked, still standing in the doorway. "Son? Still with that?" Jace laughed, dry and joyless. "I'm not your son, never was. You were just the man my mother settled for out of pity." Scout moved closer, standing tall, eyes fixed on Jace with a gaze sharp enough to slice the air. "That dog ... Jace muttered, stepping back. "He's always looked at me like he knew who I really am." "Maybe he does," Silas replied, and there was no anger in his voice, just a sorrow that had seen too much. Jace pulled a small knife from his back pocket. "The kind that doesn't kill right away, but make sure you never forget the wound. I didn't come to talk. I came to finish what you started when you shut me out 20 years ago. When you gave your love to this dog and not to me." Silas didn't move. Not out of fear, but something deeper. That kind of pain that cuts sharper than steel, knowing you lost someone not for what you did, but for what you never knew how to give. Jace raised the knife, and Scout jumped. A short howl like lightning, then the dull thud of bodies colliding. The blade flashed once in the air, then vanished into Scout's side. But Scout didn't let go. He slammed Jace against the wall, jaws clamped on his forearm, growling like the weight of the world was caught in his throat. "Bastard, let go, you damn mutt!" Jace yelled, struggling to break free. Silas rushed, moving as fast as he could. Pulled Scout away. He did it, but too late. The dog's blood splattered on the mosaic floor. Scout collapsed on his side, panting hard. Jace staggered toward the door, bleeding, leaving a trail of dark drops behind him. Silence returned. But it wasn't the same. Silas knelt beside his old friend. Scout looked up at him. There was no fear in those eyes, only the calm of someone who knew they had given everything. Till the very end. "I swear, I saw it coming," Silas whispered, gently stroking his head. "But you were faster, like always. Braver than me. More loyal than anyone." Scout closed his eyes. A loud knock broke the silence. Miss Edith and little Lila rushed in, alarmed by the shouting. Lila dropped to her knees beside the dog, tears slipping down her cheeks without a sound. "Is he sleeping?" she asked, barely. A whisper. Silas didn't answer. He just held her tight, and in that embrace was a promise that needed no words. That love doesn't die with the body, that loyalty is buried in memory, and that no child, especially one as young as Lila, should have to watch their hero die. Miss Edith called the police. An ambulance came soon after. But for Scout, it was already too late. As they carried him out, wrapped in a blanket, Lila gently placed a tiny paper flower she'd made at school on his chest. Silas didn't stop. Outside, the skies over Ash Hollow were filling with clouds. A low rumble echoed over the hills. But Silas didn't feel fear. Because even though the pain was fresh, the truth was old. Some losses can't be avoided. But some loves can't be killed either. And Scout, his old soldier, chose to die on his feet, with his eyes open, guarding the heart that had cared for him in silence all his life. That night, Ash Hollow wasn't dark. It was thick, heavy, like the silence of a house that knows what it's about to lose. Don Silas felt the first blow before he heard the voice. Jace didn't scream. He entered like cold air, without warning, a broken bottle in one hand, the other shaking from so much hatred stored up too long. "You miserable old man," he spat. "Why are you still clinging to this house if you can barely walk in it?" Silas said nothing. He had no strength left for word wars. But in his eyes was something Jace hadn't expected, a sadness so ancient it no longer hurt, it only watched. Jace shoved him against the table. Glasses crashed like soulless bodies. The air filled with the scent of stale booze, splintered wood, and betrayal. From the dark corner, Scout rose. He didn't bark, didn't bare his teeth. He simply walked toward his fate. Step by step, like a soldier heading back to the front line, knowing he wouldn't return. From the front window, Lila dropped her drawing book. "Mr. Silas." She cried, her voice so thin it sounded like a bird caught in a cage. Silas couldn't answer. Jace had already raised the bottle, ready to finish what contempt had started. And then Scout leapt. No growl. Just the solid thud of body against body. The flash of a blade catching the light for a single breath. The barely audible whimper of a canine heart breaking through flesh. Jace fell back. Scout landed on top of him, not as an attacker, but as a shield, taking the blade into his chest. Silas dropped to his knees. He held Scout with both hands, as if he could still keep life from slipping through his fingers. The dog's blood was warm. It wasn't in a hurry to leave. It spread slowly, with dignity, as if it too knew that house didn't deserve screams-only silence. "Forgive me," Silas murmured. And no one could tell if he was speaking to the animal or to life itself. Scout looked at him one last time, not with fear, not with pain, with something older. As if to say, "I'm here. I always was." Jace, bleeding from his arm, crawled to the wall. His breath was fast, cowardly. It was just a damn house. He shouted, "Just bricks, for God's sake." Silas turned to him, eyes red, but not from rage, from shame. It wasn't the house. It was the home, and you burned it down long before tonight. Miss Edith appeared with a shaking flashlight. Lila behind her, tears glistening like glass across her cheeks. The police arrived at sunrise. Jace didn't fight back. Not because he felt guilty, he didn't, but because there was nothing left worth defending. Silas refused the hospital. All he asked for was a blanket to cover Scout. He laid it gently with old steady hands, with the reverence of someone who's met death too many times and still knows how to bow to it. "Rest now, my friend," he whispered. "In the heaven of dogs, there are no knives. Only children who still remember how to love." Leela knelt beside him. She said nothing, just placed her drawing, an awkward little portrait of Scout with a flower tucked behind his ear on top of the blanket. And for a moment, silence became a hymn. A hymn for those who fall standing, for those who don't need words to live forever. Silas stayed there until the last star faded. And when he finally stood, something in his back, though bent, seemed stronger. As if the dog's death had returned to him something the world had stolen long ago, the right to still feel needed. The bells of St. Lucia's church rang out. At 6, a hollow sound that seemed to echo from a place older than time itself. Ash Hollow lay draped in a soft fog, like sighs no one had dared release. The red clay rooftops, damp with early morning dew, caught the light of a pale sun, still unsure whether it should rise at all. Don Silas sat by the window in his wicker chair. In his weathered hands, firm and wrinkled like old tree roots, held Scout's empty leash. He didn't speak. Just listened to the silence Scout had left behind, the kind of silence no prayer or pitying hug could ever fill. From the street, footsteps echoed. Slow, heavy, as if each one had to ask permission to move forward. It was Lila. She wore her flower print dress, socks slipping down, a wrinkled envelope clutched in her hand. She knocked twice gently. "May I come in, Don Silas?" He nodded without looking at her, without moving. The girl sat at his feet, just like she used to when Scout still slept there, curled up like a secret, I wrote something. For him, she said, holding out the envelope. Silas took it, opened it with a clumsy hand, and read silently. Inside was a child's drawing of Scout with angel wings. And beneath it, in crooked handwriting, one single line. He watched over me when no one else did. Silas swallowed. Hard, but he didn't cry. Men like him never learned how to cry without breaking all the way through. Thank you, sweetheart. He watched over you when I no longer could. In the town square, noise was building. The trial had begun. People gathered like it was a procession dressed in black, some holding candles, others carrying rage. Inside the cramped courthouse, the air was thick with damp and tension. Joaquin the Wolf Vargas sat stone-faced, spotless, his stare sharp as a blade. Beside him, Jace wore a smug half-smile. Silas entered without hurry. His cane struck the floor with a rhythm that carried more weight than any badge. Layla walked beside him, hand in hand, like two soldiers heading into one final war. The judge, a tired man with the eyes of a widowed father, called for silence. Don Silas, you have the floor. Silas stood. Not a breath stirred. His voice came low, rough, like rotted wood. I'm not here to beg for justice. If justice is real, it doesn't need to be shouted. I'm here to speak for what Scout saw. Because he saw everything. He looked straight at Jace. My son didn't die in war. He died when he chose not to love the one who loved him unconditionally. He died the night he stabbed the only thing still shielding him from himself. Jace scoffed. A dog? That's what you stand for now, old man. You'd rather love a mutt than your own son? Silas didn't flinch. A dog never called me useless. A dog never broke my ribs. A dog never sold me out for a handful of cash. Leela squeezed his hand. The judge wrote quietly. The murmurs swelled like a dam about to break. From the back, a woman's voice rang out, the mother of one of the neighborhood kids. She stood, eyes wet with truth. Scout saved my son. Pulled him from the road when Jace pushed him aside to get away. We all saw it. We were afraid. Another woman stood. Then another. And another. Like in those old Mexican church services where grandmothers carry lit candles for the ones who no longer have a voice. That dog was family, more than many who share blood. He stayed with me the day I buried my husband. You can't bury Scout without the truth. Joaquin shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. For the first time, his stare faltered. Jace, on the other hand, let out a smug laugh. What are you gonna do? Lock me up for killing a damn mutt? Silas stepped forward slowly. His cane struck the floor like a drumbeat. He looked Jace straight in the eyes. No, we'll lock you up for killing the last decent piece left in you. The judge lowered his gaze. He lifted the gavel. The court has heard enough. When they stepped out of the courthouse, the sky was crystal clear. The church bells rang again this time, like they were celebrating something pure. Layla let go of Silas's hand and ran toward the new statue in the town square. A simple figure of Scout, his sculpted eyes forever fixed on the horizon. Silas stood back, watching her in silence. An older woman approached him. She wore a lace shawl and carefully applied lipstick. It was Miss Edith 78, widowed, mother of 5. That dog was a miracle, Silas. And you understood that. He looked down. Not in time. She touched his arm. It's never too late to speak for those who loved in silence. Never. Silas took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, the air didn't sting. He looked toward the church roof. A single sunbeam lit the very spot where Scout used to nap. And in that moment, he knew the truth spoken from a child's heart and remembered by a dog was stronger than any verdict. It was healing. It was home. It was Scout. The Church of St. Mary of the Sun was bathed in amber light that fall morning. Orange leaves fell softly onto the cobblestones. like the sky itself was weeping slow tears. Don Silas arrived with his cane, walking slow, his heart even slower. Layla followed behind in a white dress and a red ribbon, clutching a folded notebook tightly to her chest. No one spoke when they entered. This wasn't a mass for a saint or for a martyr. It was for Scout, the old dog who died without ever saying a word, yet spoke everything through his wounded body and those eyes that never once begged. The altar was simple. A black and white photo of Scout, a broken collar, and one candle. Flickering like a heartbeat, Lila climbed the pulpit. A 10-year-old girl who had seen more truth in that dog's eyes than in any adult. She unfolded her notebook. He wasn't human. He didn't talk like we do. But when I was scared, he came and rested his head on my knees. When Mr. Silas cried at night, he lay beside him. And when the bad man came to hurt him, he stepped between them, not to attack, to love, because love bites too. When it has to protect, no one clapped. The only sound was Miss Edith's handkerchief trembling in her fingers. Silas lowered his head. He remembered the exact moment, the knife cutting into Scout's body, the muffled growl, the warm blood soaking into his fur. The silence afterward hit harder than any bark. After the service, in the plaza, Joaquin El Lobo Vargas showed up, flanked by 2 men, flashing that snake-like grin. All this for a dog, Silas? You losing your mind? Folks around here can't tell the difference between an animal and some cheap legend anymore. Silas didn't reply. He stepped forward, leaning hard on his cane. Not crazy, just hurt. Because for old men like me, losing a friend cuts deeper than losing a house. Joaquin laughed. And that bastard kid you raised? He's the one who stuck the knife in. How's that for irony? Silas's eyes hardened, but didn't flinch. Jace was raised with clean hands. If he chose to get them dirty, that's on his soul, not on the hands that held him. Tension thickened in the air. But before anyone could say another word, Leela reached out and took Silas's hand. Let's go home, Grandpa. Grandpa. Silas swallowed hard. No one had called him that in years. They walked together into the old garden, where Scout was buried beneath the oldest orange tree. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and dry blossoms. Lila placed a painted stone on the grave. It had a drawing of a heart and a paw. When I grow up, I want a dog like Scout. But more than that, I want a heart like his. Silas knelt down, letting his fingers graze the soil. I didn't deserve his love, but he gave it anyway. Because sometimes redemption isn't something you ask for. It's something you receive. A leaf lifted in the breeze. And in that moment, so slight it could have been missed, Silas smiled. Not out of joy, but in recognition. Like someone remembering the name of their first love after many long winters. No more words were said. They weren't needed. The hero was asleep. The child had learned, and the old man had finally begun to heal. The afternoon sun draped itself across the backyard like a golden sigh. It was an ancient light, soft as dust drifting through the cracks of an old memory. Don Silas knelt in the earth, his hands trembling but steady, tracing the edge of the hole. Beside him, the shovel lay still like an iron cross. The orange tree, bent by years and battered by east winds, offered quiet shade. Its leaves barely quivered, as though whispering forgotten names. Here, Silas said softly. Here you'll sleep with me, Scout, where the dead we've loved never truly leave. Lila sat on a stone near the hedge, her new ribbon red like the marigolds she brought from the day of the Saints' Fair. She clutched a small ceramic figure, a white dog with a ridiculous happy tongue. Does it still hurt, Don Silas? She asked without looking at him. He didn't answer right away. His gaze sank into the bottom of the grave, where an olive green blanket wrapped the old dog like a fallen soldier. There are aches, child, that never heal, he whispered. But you learn to carry them, like learning to walk with one less leg. Silence thickened like the scent of a freshly peeled orange. "My grandma used to say animals have souls," Leela said. "That good dogs go to a different heaven where their paws never hurt again." Silas barely smiled. It was the first time in days. "Your grandma was a wise woman. But I believe—" He paused, sifting the soil with his fingers. "I believe some of them stay close, watching over those of us who still don't know how to sleep." Leela slid off the stone. She stepped closer, slow and gentle. She placed the figurine by Scout's covered snout. "He didn't bark much," she murmured. "But I always knew when he was happy." Silas nodded. "He spoke with his eyes. Just like your mother." Lila pressed her lips tight. A single tear escaped before she could stop it. The sky began to blush, the same pink as festival tablecloths. From far away came the out-of-tune hum of an old guitar, mingling with voices and wine. But here, in the garden, time had come to a full stop. Silas laid a blossom from the orange tree on Scout's back. Then he stood up, slow and stiff, leaning on the shovel. "Want to help me cover him?" he asked. The girl nodded. Together they began to return the earth. With every shovelful, something inside Silas sank as well. But it wasn't destruction. It was surrender. Letting go without stopping the love. When they finished, Silas rummaged in the shed and returned with a small wooden cross. He nailed a tarnished brass plate to it. "Here lies Scout, faithful even in silence." "One day," Silas said as Lila watched him with wide eyes, "when I'm gone, this land will be ours." "Ours?" she asked, surprised. Silas sat beside the grave, his back against the orange tree. "You'll care for this place. Not for me, for him, for yourself. To remember that love never really leaves." Leela curled up beside him. "I promise no one will forget him, Don Silas." He laid a hand gently on her head, as though blessing something bigger than a promise. "Then I can die in peace." She shook her head hard. "Don't say that. You still have to teach me how to play the guitar, and how to bake anise bread, and how to read a dog's eyes like they're speaking." Silas chuckled with a breath that sounded like it had been waiting years. "You're right, little one. There's still bread, and songs, and memories to plant." That night when Lila came home, she found her grandmother asleep in the rocking chair. She didn't wake her, just leaned in and kissed her forehead. Then, on a scrap of paper, she wrote in shaky handwriting, "Today Scout went to the heaven of those who know how to wait without resentment." And Don Silas began to come back. She left the note by the empty teacup and went to bed with that strange peace only true endings bring, the kind that don't end in goodbye, but in staying. Morning came without asking, spilling its red light over the worn rooftops of Ash Hollow, as if the sky had bled through the night. The air smelled of wet soil, fresh-baked bread, and something else, something old, like the silence left behind when a voice is no longer there to call your name. Don Silas Alvarez sat on the wooden bench in front of the lemon tree that Scout used to circle each morning. Lila, her braids messy, her sky-blue dress stained with dirt, approached quietly. No words, just presence. He didn't look at her. He just said, his voice cracking, "It's been 3 weeks today since Scout passed." Lila didn't reply. She sat beside him, with the same care someone might use to turn a fragile page one that might tear if touched too hard. In front of them, a small white gravestone rested at the base of the tree. No name, just a single word, loyalty. "Sometimes," Don Silas whispered, "I swear I can still hear him breathing. Like silence is just the way he stays close now." Lila lifted her face toward the sunlight streaming through the branches. "Do you think he knew you loved him?" Silas looked at her then, and for the first time since the burial, his eyes held tears. "He knew, long before you said it out loud. Some souls don't need words to understand love." A deep silence settled over the garden, but it wasn't hollow. It was thick, sacred. From the dirt road, The silhouette of young Javier Costa appeared lawyer, shirt wrinkled, tie loosened, a folder in hand. He paused when he saw Silas and Lila waiting respectfully. "Don Silas," he said softly. A letter arrived from the Ministry of Defense. Silas took it slowly, as if each motion deserved to be remembered. He broke the seal. "Read quietly." Then folded it again, closing his eyes. "What does it say?" Lila asked. "Scout. Has been officially recognized as a service hero. They're going to put his name on the fallen wall for civil protection in Madrid." Javier sat down across from them. He spoke gently. "There's more. The judge denied Jace's appeal. 15 years, no parole. And Joaquin El Lobo will be extradited to Mexico for connected crimes." Lila gripped Silas's hand. "So, it's over, isn't it?" "No, child. What ended was the lie, the truth. It's just now beginning to grow." Silas stood, walked to the gravestone, and placed on it a marigold bright orange, brought by Javier from Oaxaca. "In Mexico, they say these flowers guide the dead." "Back home," he murmured. "Do you think Scout needs guiding?" Lila asked. Silas smiled for the first time in weeks. "No, sweetheart. Scout didn't go anywhere. He's just closer than our eyes can see." That afternoon, Ash Hollow held its first ceremony honoring an animal. The town square filled with elderly women in dark shawls, children holding white balloons, and retired soldiers standing straight-backed, eyes glistening. Silas gave no speech. He only stepped to the mic and said, "Scout wasn't just a dog. He was what we all wish we could be. Loyal without conditions, brave without witnesses, and faithful to his final breath." No one clapped. No one moved. Only the wind passed between the faces like a long sigh, carrying away the weight of those no longer there. Later, as the sun dipped in scorched red, Silas walked back home, Lila by his side. In his pocket, the letter. In his heart, peace. And when they reached the porch, Lila said quietly, without looking up, "I want to be like that too." "Like Scout." Silas gently touched her head. "Then remember this, Lila. Being strong doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means protecting the ones you love, even when you're shaking inside." That night, in a house where the echo of four paws no longer lingered, a girl fell asleep with a notebook beneath her pillow, and an old man lit a candle without asking heaven for anything. Because there are some things even death can't take. Because the red sun always rises again. That morning, Don Silas's house held a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of death, nor the hush of Lonelila's. It was the silence of a soul that had said everything it ever needed to say. The garden smelled of damp earth and orange peels. Lila, wearing her mint green dress and her hair tied up in a messy braid, sat in front of the headstone where Scout rested. She placed a small candle beside the stone, lit with a match that trembled in her fingers. "You knew before any of us," she murmured. "You knew something was off with him. With Jace. And still you stayed." Don Silas watched her from the porch. His hands, weathered by sun and years, held a mug of black coffee. He said nothing, just lowered his eyes as if those words weren't meant for Scout, but for himself. Jace never wrote again from prison. No apologies, no letters, not even the smallest gesture. His last words still floated in Silas's memory, sharp as a thorn without flesh. "You were never my father. Just some old fool with a dog." And yet Scout had bled for that old fool. Silas closed his eyes. The wound in his chest wasn't from Jace's punch, or the fall, or even the image of Scout collapsing on blood-soaked ground. The wound ran deeper. It was the ache of knowing he was only truly loved by those incapable of lying. He thought of his wife, gone. Too young. His mother, who sang old Mexican folk songs while stirring beef stew on Sundays. And now he remembered Scout born in Iron Ridge, but with the soul of a Nahuatl warrior, always ready, always loyal. like a son who chose to stay when everyone else had left. "People say dogs don't have souls," Silas whispered, more to himself than to Leila. "But if that's true, then how come he was the only one who looked at me with compassion when I needed it most?" Leila came closer, laid her tiny hand on Silas's forearm. "Grandpa, can I call you that?" "Of course you can, sweetheart," he replied, his smile fragile but real. She looked at him with wide eyes, full of belief in a world she hadn't given up on yet. "Scout saved me too," she said, as if realizing it for the first time. "I used to be scared of my dad. Not like Jace, but sometimes he yelled a lot. Scout would rest his paw on me and just stay there, like he was saying, 'It's over now.'" Silas nodded. That was Scout. He didn't need words. His body spoke and his silence roared. Miss Edith arrived from the street, carrying a bag of bread and wildflowers. She laid white jasmine on the grave. Her voice, faint but clear, broke the soft morning air. "Men leave, words are forgotten, but actions stay on this earth like footprints in dry mud." Silas took a deep breath. Jace had left a scar, yes, but Scout left something greater, an example, a model of what it means to protect, even when there's no strength left. A silent witness to the truth when everyone else chose to look away. And maybe that's why, in the quiet of that morning, Silas decided to write a letter. Not to Jace, not to the judges, to Leila, dear wide-eyed girl, when you become a woman, and someone tries to tell you that being strong means shouting louder or having more power, remind them of Scout. He had nothing but his body, his gaze, his loyalty. And that was enough to heal a broken soul. You can be like that too. Not with anger, with presence, with gentleness. Like Mexican grandmothers do, without making a sound, but leaving the whole house scented with faith. Silas folded the paper and placed it inside a wooden box that had once belonged to his mother. And as the sun dipped slowly over Ash Hollow, he understood something no courtroom, no verdict, no confession could ever tell him. He hadn't lost a son. He had gained a granddaughter, and through her, Scout would live on forever. For you, white-haired woman with soft steps, who gave more than you ever received, who held the family together with hands that smelled of corn and silence, the story is yours. Because you, like Scout, protected without asking and loved without expecting anything in return.